of haven't seen dealt with on television, and people were really excited about it. And we're going to be jumping in and talking about things like colorism, Black queerness, and hoodoo.
Yep.
And we're actually going to start with Natrice. She's going to be, oh, I just want to let everybody know we are recording this. So this, our 13th of the month will be on our Facebook page and on YouTube. So if there is something that you missed or you want to go back and watch it, or if you want to tell friends to watch it, please feel free to do that. But I just want to let everyone know that we are recording. The last half an hour will be a question and answering session. So feel free to jump in the chat as we're talking. If anything comes up for you that you want to get further clarification on, or if you want to elaborate on something we're talking about, feel free to jump in the chat. And then, like I said, for the last half an hour, I'll go back through and look at the questions, and we'll discuss those as a group. But yeah, feel free to jump in the chat with any questions that you have about the discussion. So Natrice is going to start us off with talking more about hoodoo. Hoodoo is a African-American tradition. It is a combination of spirituality that combines West African traditional religions, Native American spiritual traditions, and also just things that Black people developed over time while being here in the Americas. But Natrice is going to talk more about that, and she's going to talk about how hoodoo specifically shows up in Lovecraft Country. All right, Natrice, you can take it away.
Okay, perfect. Thank you, Michelle. Hi, everyone. My name is Natrice Holmes, and I'm a Kemetic Reiki practitioner and also a hoodoo practitioner as well. And I'm here to talk about how hoodoo shows up actually throughout this series of the Lovecraft Country. And I'm specifically going to hone in on episode 3, which is entitled Holy Ghost. But I just want to give just a slight background on like how hoodoo conjuring tradition started. I'm just going to I'm reading from a book called Black Magic, Religion in the African American Conjuring Tradition by Yvonne Choureau. I don't know if you can see that right here. So it says, conjuring and hoodoo traditions thrived within the slave quarters, the social and cultural hub of the Black community. Conjure spoke to the practical concerns of African-American bond persons, from their personal aspirations to matters that affected everyone, such as health, wealth, and conflict. Who were the conjurers? Colorful, diverse, and enigmatic. Conjure practitioners maintained distinctive styles and expressions of their craft. European American observers provided the first accounts of Black conjurers. The earliest dating from the 17th century, and often describe practitioners of the supernatural as cunning men or witches. By the 19th century, the terms for African-American conjurers would change. Hoodoos and root workers were the most common vernacular expressions that depicted persons who were believed to be able to manipulate unseen forces or work the spirits. So again, hoodoo and conjuring is intertwined throughout the Lovecraft Country series. And episode 3, Holy Ghost, it starts off in a church setting. I don't know if you remember that, which appears to be possibly an AME church. And hoodoo there's some elements of hoodoo that definitely come from the Black church. I don't know if you know that or not, but definitely do some research on that. The title Holy Ghost, before I even watched the episode, I got this energy of the ancestors just from the title. So I just automatically felt, okay, yeah, this is going to be there's going to be some type of conjuring, some type of ancestral veneration. And so what this particular episode, and mostly all the episodes, breaks down is the power of the Black bloodline, and how the white colonizers, they pretty much stole our traditions. They didn't want us to know our powers, and how they did that, they told us that our practices were wicked and evil, and so they indoctrinated us with their European Christianity or other spiritual practices that we were not used to, and because of that, society looks at hoodoo the way it does now as evil or witchcraft. Um, I want to start off with the first scene. I don't know if you remember where Letty was lying in the bed, and all of a sudden there was like, she didn't know she was asleep, but there was a spirit that came to the side of the bed and just snatched the blanket off of her. So that was the first example of um, restless souls that were in her house. And I don't know if you know what a restless soul is. What we say down south is a restless soul is somebody that had a bad death. That's what they call it, like either murdered or died in a car accident or something of that nature. So the spirit of the restless ancestors was trying to warn Letty right then that they were there and they were lost and not at rest. Another scene when Letty was having the party in her house, and the children, they were playing with the Ouija board, and they called in the spirits, and whichever spirit they called in was not at rest either. And so they let them know that George wasn't dead. So that the Ouija board literally spelled out George is dead. Um, any questions so far? Any comments in regards to any of that? Okay. So then we later on find out that the Winthrop house that Letty purchased is actually in her basement, where 8 Black people were murdered. They were experimented on and murdered and buried in her basement. So that's why her house was haunted and their souls were not at rest. So Letty went in and hired an African spiritual practitioner to come in to clear her house, what you call clearing. And she bought a goat. She used the goat's blood for protection for the entrance of the house, which is a part of like a hoodoo practice. Some people use different crystals. Some people use salt. There's so many different things that used for protection. And she also used the blood to put on the forehead of Letty and also Tick as they crossed the threshold of her home. They then went down to the basement and they set up for a ritual to rid of the evil spirits. Well, I'm not going to say evil. The restless spirits, which were the 8 Black people, and the evil spirit was Mr. Winthrop, the one that murdered the Black people that were kidnapped from the South Side of Chicago. So as they were calling in the good spirits, the spirit of Mr. Winthrop came in, and he actually what is called mounted the African spiritual practitioner to the point where his evil spirit got into her. So she was possessed with his spirit. And then once that happened, she was arguing and fighting with Tick, and then the evil spirit of Mr. Winthrop got into Tick. And at that point, Tick turned into Mr. Winthrop and was saying, get out of my house. And that's when Letty, she called in the restless souls who were the Black people that were murdered. She was like, please, you're still able to fight. Let's rid of this evil spirit that is Mr. Winthrop who killed you. And so they all were chanting and chanting until the spirit of Mr. Winthrop, he left. He just, left, went on to where he was supposed to go, and then the restless souls of the Black people were able to finally rest in peace. So this series, it just not this episode, but throughout this series of Lovecraft Country, it shows you the obstacles and everything that white people put us through in order for us to get our magic back. Like they stole what was ours and they hid it from us. And then once we found out, like, oh yeah, we're magic too. This is originally our power, our magic. And so they had to go through solve these different puzzles and different obstacles just to regain their power. And at the end, I believe Letty told Christina, once Letty and Tick and Montrose regained the magical powers, they were like, no, this is our powers. The magic is ours now. You cannot have our magic. And for me, this series was so powerful, because that just shows how even the obstacles that we go through to this day, not only just with like spirituality and religion, it's just things that white European colonizers have stolen from us, and everything that we have to go through to get it back. So I commend the writers for even involving the African spirituality portion, because that's something that that was lost in transition as the years went on, when our original practices were taken from us. So yes, hats off to the writers of Lovecraft Country, and bringing back ancestral reverence, and also the return of our truth. Any questions or comments?
Nitrice, we did have a comment in the chat box. People wanted to get the name of the book that you referenced. If you wouldn't mind putting that in the chat for people, or if any other books that you can think of off the top of your head, if it's not too much labor, that people.
Sure, no problem, no problem. And I see Kim Wiggins asked, can we believe in our magic and Christianity? Oh, absolutely. 3 years ago, I started this spiritual journey. Like I pretty much practice an ATR, which stands for African Traditional Religion. Prior to this, I was practicing Christianity, and my concern at the time was, okay, can I do this and Christianity? And my spiritual leader, my spiritual guide, she said, oh, absolutely. You can definitely believe in your own believe in magic and practice Christianity, because if you notice that the Black church, there's a lot of rituals that's used in the Black church that stems from African spirituality, and they're not, a lot of people, they're not going to tell you that. As far as, let's just say, communion, the drinking the blood, and drinking the wine and the blood of, and drinking the body, eating the body of Christ. I mean, that's a ritual. And so it's no different from practicing hoodoo. It's just, we do things a little bit differently.
I think that it also stands to bear that biblical texts speak of magic. There are sorcerers mentioned in the Bible. So if they're giving credence to it in the holiest of the combined 66 books that were chosen to be, quote unquote, the Bible, then it stands to reason that they both can exist.
Absolutely.
Right. And I just wanted to add to Nitrice's point about how hoodoo is incorporated in the Black church. Also, a lot of people don't know that when we talk about catching the Holy Ghost, shouting circles, getting happy, that is rooted in hoodoo. So it's not about either or. They have already been combined anyway. They're a part of the Black religious experience.
Absolutely. And I am putting the title and the author of the book I referenced in the chat. Just give me one moment. I do see another Kim, you said I should add that I asked that as an atheist. Okay, so I just want to make sure I understand. So you're saying that you're an atheist, correct? And you're wanting to know if you can also believe in hoodoo? I just want to make
Not
sure.
me, not me personally. I was just interested in the belief in the in Black people's magic being stolen, and then also belief in Christianity. So not necessarily for me. Like it's not. I'm just always interested in what people believe.
Mm-hmm.
So I was just wondering about the belief in, that Christianity was forced on Black people, and just based on kind of what you were saying, and then our magic was hidden from us and taken from us, and the belief in that, and the belief in Christianity and how they would be together.
Okay, yes, I see what you're saying. So I know for me, I can only speak for my beliefs. I
You're muted, Latrice.
You accidentally muted yourself.
sorry. Okay, so I can only speak for me, for myself and my beliefs. So for me, it's not that I don't believe in Jesus Christ. I don't believe the timeline is off for me. And plus, I don't believe in the white Jesus. I believe that that story was taken from another story. I do know that for a fact. 3 years ago, actually 3 years ago to this day, I was in Egypt and learned about our history and the original story, and I'm like, wait a minute, this story sounds too familiar, like with Horus and Osiris, and reminded me of the story of Joseph, Mary, and baby Jesus. So I'm like, okay, was this story, was the Bible, the biblical story, taken from our Egyptian history? Of course it was. But for me, I think you can believe in Christianity if that's what you want to. But for me, it's like I don't believe in like the timeline and what's written in the Bible that we have now, because a lot of books were taken out. I don't know if I answered your question thoroughly.
Oh, and I was just kind of posing it as a thought thing. Like I didn't, expect you to put all, all the answers in it. It was just something that in conversations like this interests me on what people are thinking about it.
Okay. No
I think
problem.
Dafina, we have a guest, Dafina, who has been bringing up some really good points in here about the intergenerational healing that happens through the images or the ceremonies of hoodoo that happen in Lovecraft. Can you speak to that at all?
I'm sorry.
Did you hear Erica's question?
I didn't. I'm sorry.
We have a participant, I believe Dafina is the name. She talks about the transgenerational healing that happens during those hoodoo practices, particularly the one you talked about where the spirits became whole again after they had been horribly deformed by Hiram. But also there's another transgenerational thing that happens when they're in the tomb at the base of the museum when they go back, where generation after generation comes back to, again, this generational healing that I think is prevalent throughout. And it happens particularly in moments of bringing forth hoodoo and Lovecraft.
Yes, that particular scene, it's definitely hits on hoodoo, because it's like in order to, it's like they went back to the generation of their ancestors, and they informed them of what was to come to the future in the future, because they were the future, and they were able to heal and to not really change things, but like how can I put this? Allow their ancestors to know that the decisions that they made affects the future, if I'm making sense.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Latrice. I know we have maybe a couple more questions in the chat, but I just, because of time's sake, I want us to move on to the other questions we have for the rest of the panel. And then if we have time at the end, we'll come back to the hoodoo piece.
Okay.
Okay, thank you
And
so much.
You're welcome. I've also put the book information in the chat.
All right, thank you. All right, so we have 3 panel members from BRJA. I work with them closely. They're all very intelligent and have, I'm sure, wonderful things and in-depth things to say about Lovecraft Country tonight. We have Anthony, Erica, and Julia, and I'm gonna jump in some here as well. So, but our panel, we're gonna go ahead and get started with other questions, and then at the end, if we have time, we'll definitely come back to if there are other questions about the hoodoo piece. So we're going to start with the first question about, if some of you may know, Lovecraft Country is also a book. And so apparently there are differences and choices made differently in the book versus the show. And I wanted Erica and Julia to kind of speak to that a little bit about, about the differences and what those different choices that were made, how that kind of, what messages are we given about the different choices that were made versus the book versus the show?
That's gonna make me start. Okay, so so first of all, I'm actually a fan of Lovecraftian horror. H.P. Lovecraft is was known as a horror writer. He's known for Lovecraftian or cosmic horror stories. He's known for creating the character of Cthulhu. All of these kind of like little, big, small things that you see throughout the actual show. But he was also known to be extremely, extremely racist and awful. And so Matt Ruff, who wrote the book in 2016, he actually, from my understanding here, wrote an article where a Black sci-fi writer was talking about how there was not a lot of space, or they didn't feel that there was space all the time for Black writers in the sci-fi genre, even though of course there's a history there, obviously, but that like people don't necessarily pay them attention, and so he kind of like got him to thinking about it, and so he ends up writing Lovecraft Country, and I will give her a shout out very quickly. My friend Tiffany, who was here this evening, was really, really big and like making sure and like talking about it all summer before the TV show started. And so I think that, the story itself, Matt is able to get into some of the, not shallow, but kind of the touchy subjects. So he starts talking about racism. He's talking about colorism. He's talking about these kind of broad topics that are expanded on in the TV show. But I think that his limitations, because he is a white male, that really kind of shows in the writing. And he talked about that a lot when he was talking about the TV show itself. So when Misha Green and her writers of the show were kind of expanding on all of these topics, he really was just kind of like, look, this is like, yeah, okay, I wrote this book, but I really think that like you guys can really get a lot deeper into the actual, like maybe fruits of the show, so like colorism and the relationship between the father, between Tick and his father, and like all of those things are within the series that maybe don't show up in the book, and are done a little bit differently. Because I think that in the TV show you're able to expand a little bit differently, and because you have a visual versus like just what you're maybe imagining when you're reading the book itself.
For me, I think I come to Lovecraft from a different angle. So I saw the series first and then went to try to read the book. And I come to sci-fi through what Octavia Butler called speculative fiction. So not so much the horror. And I think that one day we're gonna have to do some kind of conversation around how our books get labeled. because I had a conversation with Tanana Ridu, who in reading her doesn't feel like horror, and in seeing Lovecraft, the show doesn't feel like horror, but those are the kind of labelings that they get. And I also come to this primarily through, I think I've read one Black male sci-fi book, and that's by Stephen Barnes. The rest of it, I've come through it through Black women. So my appreciation for speculative fiction, for fantasy, for magical realism that shows up and even in smaller parts, like in Kindred or in Rita Woods's like Remembrance, magical realism, and those things are what brings me to this book. And I can see, while like I'm learning more day by day about the author and how things have happened, but I see the shifting of the main characters from like Georgia Hippolyta's daughter from in the TV series being a boy in the book. Or we're doing spoiler alerts for the book and for the movie, or no? Just for the show? And so George is alive.
Everything, Erica. Just go ahead and talk.
George is alive much longer in the book than he is. But here's the one thing that I was thoroughly impressed with. And Matt Ruff's Hippolyta chapter, that is episode 7 in Lovecraft, Amisha Green, is still phenomenal in both in both ways. And so to have that like reliance and that elevation on Black women's excellence and places that we don't typically think of it. I mean, like we can all point to Mae Jemison and more recently Katherine Johnson and those women who were charting and NASA, but he's elevating Black women who are extraordinary in the STEM fields. And I thought that was pretty profound, and that it showed up both in the book and in Lovecraft, the TV series.
Thank you, Erica. Yeah, I love that there was so much blurredness, like just, from Tick's books, and yeah, I just loved it. I ate it up. Anything else from the panel that you want to add to the differences between the book and the show? Okay, we'll go on to our second question. What was your favorite episode and why?
I'm gonna start, and I'm probably gonna steal all y'all's, because why wouldn't this be your favorite? I am Beyonce. I am episode 7. This is an homage to Black women everywhere, and it hit at a real good time that week. That when it aired, it hit a real good time socially and what was going on as well. And there's several reasons I loved it, but most of it has to do, well, the 3 main parts I loved about it was her Hippolyta's time travel. And throughout the episode, she is re-informed by I Am that the power has always lied within her to do whatever or become whatever she wants. And I just think that there are moments when we need to hear that a little bit more, instead of looking for outside validation about it. And so she was able to free herself, name herself, the actual power of naming. And Latrice, when we talk about Hoodoo and other ATRs, we're also talking about the power in naming itself. Nomo is part of the Ma'at, right? So like that episode was so incredibly powerful for me. And then when she admits that of the striving, she's like, I just became, the more I struggled towards this excellence because they said we were something else, I just became more of what they wanted me to be. And I was doing it to myself. And so how often we can be on this spinning wheel or this rat race, trying to achieve something, not seeing how we're still caught up in someone else's agenda about who we are and how we're supposed to show up. So for that and so many other reasons, that episode was amazing to me.
Thank you, Erica. Julia, what was your favorite episode and why?
So actually, here's the thing. Like, I loved Hippolyta's episode. I thought it's one of the strongest of the series. But actually, I think that 6, 7, and 8 are actually the strongest episodes of the entire series itself. And I find it to be interesting considering that they focus on women. Each episode focuses on women and their roles in this kind of fight. You know, and so the 6th episode is actually the one that focuses in Korea. With what's her name? Gia. I hope I'm pronouncing her name correctly.
I think it's
So I loved Gia. I loved that episode mainly because, for one, the story itself focuses so much on, of course, racism and American and what Black people go through, what we go through in an oppressive country. And I think that sometimes as oppressed people, we don't always focus on ways that we also oppress, or that we are also our ability to oppress others. And so here is Tick, who, you know, granted, I had my feelings about Tick, but Tick is somebody that we are following, and you're rooting for him essentially because he's our introduction into this world. And he's a part of the, you know, he's in the military, and he's over in Korea doing awful stuff. And it's like, even though you root for him, you can't like divide that he is a part, essentially kind of like a representation of American imperialism. So he's in this other country, he's harming other people, he is doing awful things. And I think that these two monsters, because Gia is essentially, what is it called? I have stuff written down. She's a 9-tailed fox.
Succubus, I think.
Yes. Oh, yeah, a succubus, but they're called kamihos, I think, in the Korean like sense. So like she herself is a monster, and she herself has gone through a lot, and they kind of meet each other, and they're both like, you know, she's a fan of like romantic stories and movies, and he's a fan of sci-fi, but so they find this kind of connection in this really dark space, and they're both kind of running from the monsters within, and they can't hide that from each other. And I love the fact that they're able to see that in each other, and that and granted, it doesn't work out, but I think that it really does give a nice, just kind of homage to monsters themselves, what we think of as monstrous. Like there are so many, we're multifaceted, and we all hold things in us that are good, that are bad, and it's really up to us in the end to decide like what we're gonna do. Because essentially, she decides at the end, like, I can't do that to him because I love him, and even though he's trash, yeah, had to get that out there. But yeah, so I think that there's so many. Yeah, that was my favorite episode. So that, and then Hippolytus comes afterwards, and then her daughters come. And those are my 3 favorites.
Thank you, Julia. Anthony, what was your favorite episode and why?
So mine was, and Erica and Julia will be happy about this because it actually was mine, and they wanted me to talk about it. Was the episode where they go back in time and you get to see Montrose when he is a child. And because I'm the person that watches the show, that I'm trying to figure out and connect the dots, because you see this kind of relationship that they have that's rocky, and you get glimpses and pieces of, and you can kind of assume why, and like this piece is off, and it kind of filled in the picture for you. And I'm definitely a person, if you know me, I love to have the conversations about breaking generational curses. And so you get to see how Montrose is dealing with his sexuality, how his father responds to that. It's the conversation of that we often have in the Black family about what is discipline and what is abuse, what is the lasting impact of that. You get to see Tick and him in real time, get to have the conversation, not even the conversation, but the moment of the realization of his father's sexuality and like the rumors that he had heard about that. And see him go into being a lot of times with them. Tick is, how old is he in the show? He's in his 20s, I think, but very much goes back into his like being a son and being a kid in their relationships together. His dad isn't fully a man the way he wants him to be, or a father the way that he wants him to be. And so the toxic masculinity that exists between both of them, they can't quite communicate the way that they need to with each other. And then it's so real because it doesn't get unpacked all the way. You don't end it with a bow in so many ways in which it happens. a lot of people were like, it's very problematic, it's very toxic, but also it's very real. And so that was, my favorite episode.
Thank you, Anthony. I just want to take a second to remind everyone that if you have any questions or comments or insights, please drop it in the chat box and we will get to it in the last bit. I want to segue into what Anthony just said about, and Julia calling Tick trash. What are our thoughts as a panel on Tick? What do we think about Tick as a character, as a Black man, and in his relationship to Letty? What do we think about toxic masculinity showing up, respectability politics? Thoughts on that?
So I'll go first because I'm sure Julia and Erica are going to really blow it out. So I'll go first to say my short thing. We were talking before about what do we call him? Is he a scrub? Is he Erica said what, gigolo? And I was saying that it's not, the problems that exist with Tick aren't just with his relationship with Letty. Tick doesn't show up well in a lot of ways. He didn't show up well as a son, even as a nephew. He's very centered on himself, on his relationship with his girlfriend. Even if you're looking at respectability politics in that time, he wasn't a provider, right? He wasn't ready to pay the bills. He wasn't ready to be a husband. He was very focused on like where he was and what he needed to do. You can even say that he wasn't even, he kind of validated all his work that he needed to do once he found out he was going to be a father for his child. But you can very much say that that was very selfish, that his acts were still very selfish and it wasn't for his family, right? And so I think there's a lot that's loaded around Tick that, again, goes with the generational curses that are there. But I think it's more than just like his relationship with Letty. I think he has bad relationships with a lot of people there on the show. And so I'll let Julia and Erica blow the rest out the water.
Thank you, Anthony.
I just don't, look, I think that in a show that is focusing on oppression and generational curses, I understand why Tick acts the way he acts. I still just don't like him. I think that he complains about, he doesn't trust easily, like I said, and I understand why, but he doesn't, he just wants to lead all the time, even though he's clearly trying to work through some stuff he needs to work through. It's like he just doesn't allow like space for other people and their stuff. It's like, and to me, it's like inherently, I think as Anthony said, there's something inherently selfish about it. Now, here's the thing. Selfishness, I think, is it gets a bad rap. I think, I understand why Tick is the way that he is. But I just think that a lot of the time, in comparison to the other characters, particularly the women in the show, who are unfortunately completely unselfish most of the time. Granted, Letty has some stuff too, which is why they kind of, that's why they work. But I think that seeing other people kind of like sacrifice their time and their space and their help, and Tick is just always just like, oh, well, I was abused. And it's just like, okay, we get it. We hear you. We get it. I understand. But what are we going to do about, the monsters that are popping up? It's like, he's just tiring. Lord Jesus, I'm going to let Erica go ahead because I'm clearly getting my feelings about it.
I think I have the most sympathy for Tick out of all y'all, actually. Well, not all y'all on the call, but certainly between Julia and Anthony. I think he's quintessential man child. I mean, like if we were to put a picture next to it. So, but I see him as being so very, very real. We are very frequently tumbling through life, dealing with our own things in our own heads about stuff and not recognizing how we're impacting other people, particularly people that have looked out for us. I don't know that I necessarily thought his relationship with Uncle George was that bad, but that was, I didn't have a huge problem with Tick that made him a big problem for me over any other character. And so I still was able to have compassion for him, although it was a little bit too much of the ugly cry with him. But I thought it was good that he was allowed to cry and be in those states. I do question whether or not the authors gave him a whole lot or gave the viewer a whole lot about like what's motivating him to move forward. just sheer what? Like, you know, like it was always confused. You know, trying to, because it wasn't really like he was really trying to recover his family's past. Because that was what Montrose was doing. Montrose was the one who was actually trying to uncover what his mama's family was like and how they came to own the book. And he got a lot of information that said, Tick, I'm trying to steer you elsewhere from that. So his motivations were never really clear. I know that in the pre-chat about this, we had a conversation about whether or not we think he really did. And they said season 1 is over. I think they might bring Homeboy back. So we'll see. So all y'all Tick haters, get ready to see him in season 2.
I hope not. I mean, here's the thing. I think that like that's one of the things I can say about the show that I wish was like a little bit better. That I know that they were following the chapters of the actual book, but I really wish they could have expanded. I mean, here's the thing. From based off of what I have seen of Tick in the show, he annoys me. Like I said, I understand why. I understand, like, you know, and you're right, his motivations are sometimes unclear. I feel like he was probably dropped in a lot of these issues, so I understand that element too. But there's certain things I'm just like, yo, like I just need a break from him. So if he does not come back, you know, it will be okay. I think the series will be okay without him. You know, thank you for your sacrifice.
And for the record, I'm in the middle about him. I'm not a pro or against, because I also had like many moments that, especially the episode that the police officer showed up and Tick was in his, like, still in his uniform, and they acknowledge that, right? And then you see the time period that he was actually in the service, right, to become American and get the, you know, the privileges of being American and serving your country, and then having this interaction and being at home. And so it very much gave that, for me, that Tick is a runner. And you know how some people that are just like, here's another roadblock and another barrier that I faced, and it's like, if I can survive it, then I'm going to move on and go to the next thing, right? He was very much a runner. Which is frustrating to me personally, but in a lot of ways, it's like, oh, I can understand it. So I'm neutral about him coming back or not.
I'm okay with him coming back. Just my 2 cents. Juliana made a hashtag. Well, keep Tick going. Okay.
I guess I'm alone. I just feel like in the horror sci-fi tradition, it's really cool to sometimes kill off characters, and it, like his purpose is done. It's like, and it's kind of like a Ned Stark in this way. Like, you didn't see it coming, but look, sometimes that's the way the cookie crumbles. Your head sometimes ends up on a pike, you know, and it's just got to be done. So I thank you, Tick. We love you. It was cute, you know.
It was cute.
I miss Ned Stark too, though. So maybe I just like keeping my characters.
See, there you go. There's a connection there.
I want to move on to talk about Montrose. I know a lot of my friends. So I was, you know, after every episode, I was talking to friends about this show. We were just like dissecting and talking about it. And I know a lot of my friends, more so than Tick, had issues with Montrose, especially until we get to the Tulsa episode, right? So I guess I just want the panel to talk about their feelings and thoughts around Montrose as a character. And also I want to talk a little bit about Montrose's sexuality and the handling of the queer sex scenes in the show, especially when we talk about, you know, now that we are fortunate enough to see other Black queer men on screen in shows like Pose. And so I feel like we were almost spoiled with those scenes, and then to watch this, you know, some of the queer scenes in Lovecraft, for me personally, was a little jarring. So I just wanted the panel to speak a little bit on Montrose, his sexuality, and the queer sex scenes.
So to me, first of all, I mean, like, all praise to Michael K. Williams, who is a phenomenal actor and knocks it out the park in just about any and every role that I've ever seen him in. He is amazing. And he brought so much emotional levity to the character of Montrose that, like, I was right there with him, even when he was getting on my nerves too. But, like, I still love him. I think that his character, so here's the thing. I, as a straight woman, like, I don't understand that story, because it's not my story. I guess, like, my point of view would be this would make sense for that time period for him to be kind of like the quote unquote angry, gay man. But there's a lot of, I think, issues connected with the way LGBTQ people are portrayed in stories. And we already know that, like, obviously gay people have existed all through time, and not all of them were angry. So I think that to add to maybe it, to me, some of it was connected to the way Tick's stories, like it was like he had to be angry in order for Tick's story to kind of like have a payoff. I'm not sure. But what I do know is that I think his relationship in the gay sex scene was very jarring. It was very jarring. I think because it seemed very brutal. Like it seemed unnecessarily brutal. I think that there could have been a moment of, I don't know, like softness or just, like he can still be confused like about what he wants to do, but like it just seems very just like brutal. And I think in comparison to maybe other series that we have seen, like Pose, where we're getting kind of the full gamut of LGBTQ relationships and how they look and how they can look, it is like definitely like a very jarring thing.
And this was a deviation from the book, right, Julia?
Yeah.
So yeah, so for one, like I said with Tick, I couldn't figure out what his motivations are. I think Montrose's motivations were pretty clear. About the gay sex scene, I think that for me, it becomes problematic because of all of the imaginings that we have of what that could look like, and even the relationship that he has with, what's the bartender's name? The bar owner's name.
I always forget his name.
Right, but so when Montrose comes that one time when we're first introduced to their relationship, he says, "Was it the whites or the blacks that beat you up this time?" So he's continuing to be in that, and so then we also have to think about his partner, who was in this relationship where he's allowing himself to be diminished by a man who is so tortured that he's only coming for angry sex or and these other ways. And so I thought it was important for us to see him kind of fold out of that. But I'm just out of all the stories they could have told about what this would look like in the time period, why this set of stories and the anger and the and yeah because that's what I have right there.
Yeah, I wanted so much more for him. I just felt like he, for whatever reason, loved Montrose so much and put up with so much abuse and being hidden, and it made me sad to watch. Anthony, did you have anything to add?
Yeah, I think that they the way that the internalized homophobia played out for him was it felt very consistent throughout the show. So even the episode where I think that they went out and there was like a quote unquote kind of like breakthrough or kind of like moment where like he felt more comfortable, and did they dance or something? I don't know. But there's this constant back and forth that he is having with his internalized homophobia. And even kind of like the question of the how much does he want to be free in his sexuality is even a question that like oftentimes is a question in queer communities, right? That even if you feel safe and you're able to, how much do you want to lean into that? And I even like the I think it shows in the part at the breakfast scene where, his partner or the person that he's with, I don't know if there's partners, made the breakfast, and he was like, what else are you going to complain about? The grits, the coffee being too wet, right? And so like his back and forth and being like, this is what he wants on some level, but even though he's safe in his house, the neighbor wasn't there to see them, he's been pushing away in this relationship that feels so accurate to someone that is not out or down low at the time. So
Yes, that was hard to watch. I just wanted to add one more thing. Oh, go ahead, Julia.
So I was also just going to mention that I know there was also some pushback on Montrose because in, I think it was the third or fourth episode, when he kills the Two-Spirit character. Like, you know, that was also something that was kind of like, you know, like, and I think once again, Misha Green, who admitted that she did not give enough to that scene, that she did not think through that scene enough, but that she was trying to once again show that oppressed people oppress other people. It's not as straightforward as we like to make it seem. I think that was also like some of his actions. It was kind of like, why would you do that? So there was a lot of just like, you know, confusion. And I think that maybe that comes across, as Anthony was mentioning, I think on screen. And I think because Michael K. Williams is an excellent actor, that certainly, I think, it allowed you to maybe feel those emotions a little bit differently.
I agree. All right, we're gonna move on to, unless there's anything else from the panel, we're gonna move on to the next question. So I wanted to talk about Ruby. Ruby's by far my favorite character in the series. Yeah, just like your thoughts on her story arch, on her relationship with William Christina, on her relationship with Letty. What else? How does colorism show up? How does respectability politics show up? Internalized racism. There's so many things we could talk about when it comes to Ruby, but I just want to hear your thoughts around Ruby and all of those things.
There are very many days when I wish I had that potion. Walk up into my good job with that potion and see how the tables turn a little bit. So you know, the Ruby experience, I appreciate so much about her as a character there, and her presentation as a character in the TV series. A voluptuous woman on screen having sex, right? The way she is able to pivot to try to meet these norms that, well, again, like very much like Hippolyta in that scene that she has when she's talking to Josephine Baker. She's trying to be what they say you have to be in order to achieve X, Y, and Z, but how easily she's pivoting and how she's trying to achieve her goals that way. I think were interesting to follow, and you could see her motivation a lot. I think there's one particular scene that I'd love to hear some discussion around, and that is when she's with Christina after Bobo died. And she says to Christina, don't you care that people like me are dying, or that Bobo, a part of my community, is dead? And Christina said, I don't. But Ruby does not turn her tail and leave. And then Christina asked her, but like, you're here and you're not cross town with them, while, you know, Dee is getting chased around by, I forget what they're called. But yeah, so some conversations around that in Ruby too. And then also like the relationship she had with not wanting to be seen as the white man's mistress. And so she didn't want, even this, when she was wearing white skin, she didn't want William to kiss her in public. She wanted him to kiss her as Ruby. So I think that there are a lot of things that were there. I think Ruby is pretty fascinating, and I like that she showed up in the ways that she did, multi-talented, very striving, and very realistic in those kinds of ways.
Thank you, Erica. Julia or Anthony, do you have anything to add?
So Ruby, my girl Ruby, they did Ruby so bad, y'all. I'm so hurt how to get my girl. So I loved Ruby. I think that like we have a show that explores Black people and Black people who are happy and have their own lives and who are proud. And I also think that sometimes we don't always talk about it in the mix of like being like Black girl magic and having our community and all that other kind of stuff, how tiring it actually is. How emotionally tiring and draining it is to walk in spaces and to know that like you're going to be looked at, you know, a certain way, or you're not going to be accepted. And I think that sometimes we kind of keep that part of you know, our story secret, because that's a part of the whole strong Black woman trope. And I think that, you know, it took me a minute to kind of realize, like, I think Ruby kind of explores that. Like you have Hippolyta, you have, you know, young D, you have Letty, but like particularly with Letty and Ruby's relationship, like Letty gets to be a little bit, like, at least seems a little bit more free in certain ways, at least from, I think, Ruby's kind of point of view, because she's lighter and she's smaller. And so I think that Ruby kind of encompasses like this kind of like tired, like, look, I need a break and I'm going to take a break. I'm going to take this potion. I'm going to sleep with this weird looking white man. I am going to, you know, like live my life, and I'm going to see how the other half lives. I'm going to do it. While also, I think, you know, maybe kind of admitting, look, Christina is evil, but Christina read her. Like, Christina told her, like, I mean, you asking all these questions of me. Like, I mean, granted, like, what do you expect? But at the same time, like, well, girl, you're not over there marching with them people. Like, you over here in my house. And I think that is, you know, that says something. That sometimes, like, it kind of, like, when you see, for even now, like, if you see someone, a name trending on social media, sometimes you just like, I don't feel like dealing with it today. I can't put up a post today. I can't, you know, I just can't do it today. And I think that there was a moment for Ruby in the series where, you know, with Emmett Till's death, she just couldn't do it. She just needed to be out. And I think that Christina kind of letting her know, like, I see that. Like, you don't got to lie about that. I already see it. It's something that I think as Black people, we're not always honest about. We're just like, we're just tired. And I think that Ruby was tired of having to deal with all of the heaviness that comes with being Black and being a Black woman in a country that hates you. Like, I think she's fascinating, and I really wanted her to. Now I want her to come back if she's, you know, actually dead. Like, so let's get that trending. Hashtag bring Ruby back. I'll put that in the chat.
I think you actually you flew over something that I forgot to mention, and that was about the colorism aspect between her and Ruby. And I don't know if anybody else caught it or why it stuck out to me, but Ruby has this experience-ness that's always associated with her. And then I don't know why the writers of the show had to make Letty the virgin. And is that connected to like the lightness part of, you know, the colorism spectrum for her, and Tick, a semi-virgin, having his only sexual encounter be with a monster. So I was wondering if that was, you know what I mean? She definitely embodied a lot of the. So which one do we have? We have Mammy kicked off there. We have like the Jezebel kicked off there. We have the matriarch kicked off there. But Letty gets to be Letty until she mentions that she is a virgin or this is her first time. It really feels like she's going down one of those tropes as well. And why is it important for virginity to come up in this movie or in this show?
You know, I think that there was a lot. I found that the whole thing with Letty being a virgin was so interesting, because it's another reason why, like, you know, about masculinity and Tick, is that she was known as a good time girl. It's like, essentially, and granted, like, that sounds like very old school, but she was known as a good time girl. And the thing that she let people, but she didn't like dispel. Granted, she didn't have to. It's no one's business. But Tick also just assumed like that was the case. Like he, you know, him like having sex with her, and she was like, oh, well, you know, like, it's my time of the month, and he was like, oh, okay, like, you know, he like believed it all, so he was just like, well, no, because I know, like, I've heard that you get around. So I think that a lot of these tropes, like, they get played with in a very interesting way, where Letty is like, no one is who they seem to be in the show. Like, no one is, you know, like, Letty is, like I said, a fun, good time girl, but she's really not. Like, she's just like everybody else. She's kind of like Tick in a lot of those ways too, because, like I said before, she's kind of selfish. Like, she does stuff, like, she's taken care of by Ruby. Like, you know, she's kind of bailed out by Ruby in so many, like, ways. And like that cemetery scene where, like, you know, Ruby tells her, like, I'm glad that you have figured out what family is supposed to be like now, but like I could have used that years ago. It's like, so I think that she just gets to operate in a very different way, and it's very interesting to kind of see, like, I think how that plays out, which is why I think it makes Ruby's story even more sad, because she doesn't get that. Like, I feel like there was something else that was missing from the ending of her arc that was truly her ending.
So I'm different from you all. I was like, at first I was like, Ruby, don't take the potion. Don't even go down this road. And I think that it was supposed to make things easier for her. And I was like, to me, it put on more burden, right? And so it made me think about when she was a white person and being and having those conversations with the other white women and other white people that thought she was just white, of people of color that passed for white, right? And the burden of hearing those conversations, and it's like, what do I do in this? Then she felt like, even though she was white working in that department store, that there was the internalized oppression that was happening with the other Black woman that was there. And so she felt like she had to assert herself in that situation. And then come out of the skin and be like, but actually, Emmett Till just got murdered, and I feel like I'm exhausted now, and I can't, even whatever show up is for her, like be present in a way that, to me, it felt like it took away from maybe she would be able to be more present or be present in a different way in that moment. But at that point, she had already been going back and forth through all of these transformations and had seen so much stuff. And I was like, was that even worth it? It felt exhausting. And then, oh no, that was all of my things. I just felt like at the end, I liked her, but at the end, I was like, was the journey worth all of that? Was the small breaks that she got worth all that she had to then like digest, and then still keeps, like, she didn't take the potion and she forgets all those things and they're gone. So.
Yeah, I get that. I think also though, I think that like her, like, so one of the things that I found very striking is that, for example, she gets the job as a white woman at the store, but like, she kind of meets the other Black girl at the store. And all this time, like, you would think that maybe she applied to the job and she got turned down from the job. That's actually not what happened. Like, she just didn't apply. It's like, she didn't apply because she already assumed, like, I'm not going to get it because of her, the color of her skin, her body. All of these things kind of play into it. And then I also think that, like, Ruby is a really good example of, like, how insidious whiteness actually is. Because she takes this potion and, like, she kind of, like, there's moments where she starts acting a little bit, a little bit finicky. And it's like, what are you doing? So she even has, like, I think that, like, everybody has that in them, where, like, they can become like their oppressors, that they can become just as evil or vindictive as the people they claim to kind of say, like, oh, I don't like these people because they're harming me. We all can be harmful. And so I think that maybe some of her lessons were her recognizing that like, she needs to, I don't know, she needs to kind of back up, because once she's decided whether she takes the potion or not, you still have to, I think, kind of think through what are the implications of all of those things.
Very true. I really like what Anthony had to say about, was it all worth it? Like, just the process of watching it and how gory it was, and I don't know, and watching it, I don't know why, but I thought about how we talk about cultural appropriation and how we talk about how white women wear us as costumes. And I don't know why it was almost like an inverse of cultural appropriation in some weird way. But that was one of the thoughts that I had about it. All right, I want to move on to our last question, and then we're going to move to the questions from the participants. So we can't not talk about Diane. So I just want to know what the panel thinks about Diane, and just like, I just love that she was like this little baby scientist and I don't know, I just loved her so much, and that she was an artist and a dreamer. And I guess I want to talk about the fact that she was haunted, the fact that she lost her friend to violence, to racist violence, and also about how her story arc ends, and her killing Christina. Like, how do we feel about that?
I know that some people had an issue with it, about her killing Christina. I loved every second of it. And let me tell you why. For one, I think that when we talk about movement and movement work, we're always talking about the next generation and what they bring to the table. And I think that, you know, Letty and those were just kind of like giving nice speeches to Christina, like, we took your power away, and none of your people gonna have this power. And that was awesome, right? You know, 2 snaps, right? But at the same time, like, you know, here comes Dee, and she's like, oh, they left you alive? Like, no, like, they don't learn either. Like, y'all don't learn, and you gotta go. Like, you done all this stuff. I got a bionic arm because of you. I had these 2 crazy dolls chasing me everywhere. Like, you done killed family and friends. You gotta go. Like, and, you know, leaving you alive, what does that do? So I think that, to me, it was very just what each kind of group generationally represents, and what happens when we're dealing with fighting oppression and fighting racism, and dealing with what white supremacy actually is. Some people are going to do the work. They're going to sacrifice. Some people are going to give the speeches and like do all the movement. But then some folks, the blood is going to be spilled. And I think that to me, Dee kind of represented that, and particularly I think because she's a girl. She's a girl in a world where she's abandoned. And that like really just kind of spoke to me in connection with her mother, with Hippolyta, that like she, even with all of Hippolyta's greatness and exploration, that like her daughter felt abandoned at a very important time in her life. Like her friend, like I said, who was Emmett Till, like that's a huge thing, is killed in the most brutal way, right? Like when we think about race, like think about when you learned about Emmett Till. Like I remember how old I was, where to me, like, I don't know why I assumed this, but like, oh, they're killing like adult Black people. They killed like a teen, right? They brutalized them. And so I think that her, like, in the smelling of the body, like all of these things, and yet like all these adults are kind of like worrying about their own stuff and not about the girl who just lost her friend and doesn't know where her mother is and lost her father, and like, so much loss, and she's forgotten. And so I think that for her, it was like, if we're going to deal with this, like, homegirl got to go. Like, it's too much. And to me, that's what makes her so awesome. I loved her.
I think Dee's character, particularly in that episode, but even starting before then, is she's not seen a whole lot, and she's always kind of passed off either to someone else to kind of babysit. And I think that there's, vestiges of truth there. Like our kids are grappling with the reality of being Black in a society, as we are too. And very often, because we're in our own heads about how to deal with it and how to make a way, and that we think we're being protective, but we're not protecting, right? So there is a gap that's created, and Dee is an example of kids falling through the gap in the best intentioned of circumstances. Like, these people all claim to care about her. She is in a quote unquote nuclear family of sorts, meaning her dad has gone, but like she has these people all around, and still, we tend to blame those things, that those situations where families deviate from what you're supposed to be, like a 2-parent home with 2.5 kids, deviating from that structure as being how kids fall through the gaps. And here you see that the gaps are created by just trying to, not understanding how to, or the process that we go through of trying to figure out our own coping mechanisms and tools to live in this life, while the adults around us are doing the same, and nobody has a handle, and no one's being given a guidebook for it. And it changes in intensity. And so even if we're thinking about the fact that, yeah, Emmett Till was her best friend, there was also a lot of other lynchings, right? And so at that time, she probably was feeling a little desensitized, like we might be feeling right now, seeing another video come on IG or Facebook or something like that. And so I think that those are, I think that speaks to it. I just felt like Lovecraft fits right here. And it couldn't have been planned. We didn't know what 2020 was going to be like, but it fits right here in this nexus.
I agree.
Yeah, y'all said the things that I was going to. is that and I'll always go back to like there was an August 13th event that we had the conversation where it was over children's books, and a white participant asked, when do you have the conversation about race with your kids, and like how do you have it? And so it's very much takes and sweeps from under the rug that Black people do not have the privilege to wait to have the conversation and to unpack it the way that they want to, right? And it shows all the systems that were at play that took that away from her, right? Is that like she had her mom was just like missing and just gone out of the picture. She didn't know what to do with that. White supremacists killed her best friend, you know, very much into today that people are killed by police brutality. People lose their parents because healthcare is not serving the way it needs to, right? And so that this idea that it's just heartbreaking that it's like she's forced to become an adult before she's ready to, or before she should have to be. She's spending and trying to survive. And there's like nobody else there. She's doing the best that she can do. The people around them are doing the best that they can kind of do. And it's like, that's just the way that it works living in a racist society. And
but also she finds a way, the resilience within herself to deal with the monsters. Like she called the monsters into this circumscribed space. So it starts off by the white cops that are monsters circumscribing her with like the little asterisks on the ground to keep her there until they put the spell on her to get Mopsy and Topsy. Who are they? What were their names? People help me with the names. Anyway,
Topsy and Topsy, I can't remember. Julia, you remember Julia? Something in Topsy. We know what you're talking about.
Yeah, Bopsy and Topsy, I think.
But she came up with it. Like this is her coping mechanism. This is her resiliency in trying from the cues in society and how this should happen. She draws a box and she draws them in it, which draws them to her. Who gets in the way? An adult that has not dealt with his own crap, right? And then she winds up getting affected because she had it under control a little bit. So I forgot to mention that part.
That was an excellent point, Erica. Okay, we're gonna move to the questions unless the panel has any other closing thoughts. Okay. All right, so we're gonna go back. Oh, go ahead, Erica.
One, we cannot forget the Dogon warrior image that we're given. And I know that Natrice talks about how history of ancestors is woven in to Lovecraft as well. But when Hippolyta goes back and I looked it up, and now we are supposed to be the last living survivor of the warrior of the Dogon. They actually defeated some white invaders, and now the one who was like training her, and when after she leaves Paris and she goes to this place, is the name of the supposed last living survivor of said warriors. So I think that's important. Another important thing, I just like the gems or the Easter eggs, they call them. I put them there. Like the woman when Hippolyta is driving along to go to the observatory is the first Black woman to do the like biking trip across the country. So I appreciate that. Even Emmett Till, because they call him Bobo. They don't call him Emmett Till. We're making that connection, right? You know, because of what our history is. But in the thing, they call him Bobo, right?
I think they do name him Emmett Till. They do.
I think a newspaper puts his name at a point and they show the newspaper. I don't think they verbally say it, right?
Well, no. Well, Emmett Till's nickname was Bobo, so that's where that comes. So it's supposed to kind of be like they knew him so well that they were able to nickname him, but like his nickname actually is Bobo.
Thank you, Julie. I did not know that. But no, I agree, Erica. Just so many gems. And even the name of the bar, Denmark Vesey, who, led a slave revolt. I love all the layers. All right, we only have a few minutes left, so I'm gonna try to get a couple of these questions in. Ethan asked, while you were speaking, I was interested in Christianity and much of white settler colonial culture. A good evil binary is present to categorize things. As you were talking about restless souls, how they were not evil, rather restless, in need of reconciliation. I was interested in the good evil binary present in Hoodoo, as well as does Hoodoo operate in a different paradigm? So that question is for Natrice. If you feel like you want to answer that at all. I'm not sure if Natrice is still with us, so we're going to go on to another question. Let's see. Okay, someone asked, what did you all think about the similarities between the Lovecraft storyline and Christianity, meaning Tick as the savior figure and Letty as the Virgin Mary in relation to Christianity? Julia, you're nodding your head. You want to speak on that?
So not so much that I wanted to speak on it, but that I certainly noticed some of that. Of course, like, I mean, he's literally kind of almost put on a cross at the end of the series, which is another reason why I think that he should stay gone. But, you know, there you go. I think that there is, like I said, I think the layers of, you know, Christianity and spirituality and, like, you know, hoodoo, like, those are all very interesting things, because I think that the show in a lot of ways is showing that these are our stories. Like, these aren't like some like random like stories outside, but these are our stories as well. That we're a part of all of this, whether it be hoodoo or Christianity. These things are interconnected, and so I think I loved the imagery. I loved that kind of ending. Yeah, that's all I really can really say about it. But yeah.
Sorry, y'all, I'm trying to go through the comments versus questions because there was conversation in the comments, which is great. Oh, someone said, so because Tick died, his protector transferred to D ? So we're going to admit Tick is gone, and now it's up to D and Letty, the child she's carrying, also meaning that Tick was not Montrose's son. So I guess also talking about, like, what do we think about D and Letty's baby being the new generation? What are our thoughts around that?
I made my thoughts about Dee being the next generation. I think that she's in it to win it. Her and her little pet, I think, are in it to win it. And I'm waiting. If we get a second season, I would love to see their adventures.
Yeah, I wonder if that's going to be all of second season. What if like all the rest of them are just not there? It's just kind of like the next generation.
That would be interesting.
So then we'd have like George, the picture of George Freeman, the author of Lovecraft Country, because in the book that Tick's holding, he's the author. George Freeman is the author of the book. So then we would see him progress until he's writing the book, because he has somehow gotten all this history there. I mean, it's interesting. I still want to see some people come back, right? I want to see the other lodges. I want to see what happens with the transfer of power from the other lodges, or how, like, you know, I mean, there's this powerful statement where she's like, you know, magic is ours now, right? But then how do we take over the things that were amassed by these other lodges that were out there? They can no longer use it because magic has been taken from white folks. But then how do we amass those resources? So I think that's another point that we have to bring up in the other one as well.
I agree. There is a theory floating around on the interwebs that Diane was, when her mom takes her in the closet, it's like, I'm going to show you how to draw again or something like that, that she actually does time travel as well. And that's where she gets her arm from. And that she's the one that Tick sees in the future and hands the book to him. That's a theory. Julie, I guess you've heard the same. So I love that idea, though, that she was traveling.
Yeah, that's the cool thing about time travel. That, like, there's so many like ways that you can take that. There's so many ways that you can explore, like, what that whole thing means. The magic is ours now. How does that actually even look? And I mean, like, because I think my friends and I, when we talked about it, it was like, how does Dee go on in that society with a bionic arm? Like, that doesn't necessarily make sense. Like, she can't just be like, oh, well, where'd y'all get that from? Like, you know, what's going on there? Like, you know, she can't just walk around. I mean, she could, but, like, what does that actually do? So I think that there's so much to explore, and that's the cool thing about sci-fi and Lovecraftian horror, or cosmic horror, because you can kind of go in these different avenues. And I mean, the whole thing with Lovecraft is about seeing something that's so terrifying that like it just kind of screws with your mind. Like that's what his stories were about. And so I think that the story itself of the show really kind of goes into that. Like it expands what's possible, and that's what's really cool.
Yes, thank you, Julia. Latrice, did you want me to repeat the question about the good and evil binary?
Yes, sure.
You need me to reread it, or did you want to address it?
Sure. I was actually trying to type something up to Ethan directly, but I don't see him here. But I think his question was, is there good and evil within the hoodoo practice? Because I mentioned, where's his question? I mentioned something about the restless souls versus Mr. Winthrop being, well, that was my interpretation as far as describing Mr. Winthrop being evil, because he was the one that murdered the 8 Black people and, you know, buried them under his mansion. As far as hoodoo, there's no good or evil. It's more of like a healing practice, ancestor veneration, restless or lost or elevated souls. So normally if your soul is restless or lost, you've pretty much like died in a way where unexpectedly, like a harsh death, murdered, car crash, fatal accident, something of that nature. And sometimes the soul is still around and they don't realize that they're gone. And so you have to put them, you know, bring them to the light. Like, you know, you're no longer in the physical realm. They get stuck in between the physical and the spiritual, thinking that they're still in the physical and they're not. And that's what can cause like what they call what some people consider hauntings. If that makes sense.
Thank you, Latrice.
There was
Go ahead, Erica.
There was a piece of that I thought was hearkening towards like the experimentations that were done on Blacks, particularly domestic servants at that time, because you know you had like the baby head, or they had chopped off something and put it on something else. And I think, you know, I mean, we know about Henrietta Lacks, so we know that real reality, and so how these were people and that may have worked with him, or that he got in contact with it somehow, but then tortured them to the point of experimentation, and how that is like then becomes the basis of a lot of our modern science and medical knowledge, right? So, but it's again on the backs of Black folk.
Exactly.
Absolutely.
I'm just going to close quickly with the last question about Topsy and Bopsy. Did you guys want? Someone had a question about where they came from. Did anybody want to tackle that? Because weren't they from the book? Oh gosh, I can't remember the name. There's a book in the bathroom with Diane, and I was pretty sure I can't remember what book.
Uncle Tom's Children.
Yes, thank you. Yeah. That was my interpretation, that those were the characters from the book. But some people had also said something about the girls across the street that she throws the rock at. But that was my interpretation of it, that they were characters from that book come to life. But I didn't know if the panel had anything to add to that.
So like I felt like, to me, it was very like with those characters. For one, they look like those weird, scary ragtime dolls, and so to me, it was just like, oh, that's terrifying. And it's one of the last things that she sees when she's trying to, like, when she knows that something is going on. When Dee is kind of like, something is up, and she's trying to get out of the bathroom when Montre was banging on the door, and she, like, you know, that book falls, and so you see that character, that, you know, those dolls essentially kind of, you know, like on the cover. I thought that there was something, so because like they're dancing and it's very like Happy Valley-esque, like Uncanny Valley rather, just like that kind of weird smile. Like, they seem maybe from afar like they're just like two little girls, but they're not just two little girls. It's a whole creep factor. Yeah, like, I mean, it's very scary, but I also see that Simone in the chat It's saying that the Jigaboo girls unite two Afro-Caribbean elements of spirituality, smaller, jovial characters that we often identify as kids, but are spirits who aim to tease, frustrate, etc. They remind me of tricksters. They have plenty of opportunities to kill you, but they don't. Their intention is to scare, not to physically harm. To physically hurt. That is a really good, I think, kind of interpretation of that, because, like, I mean, they harm her and that, like, they are changing her, but you don't really see it. Like, you just know that 1 minute she's laying in the bed, but they're constantly frustrating her. Like, they're playing games. They are very trickster-esque. So thank you for that, Simone. And hugs from Amsterdam. Oh, it was fun there. Thanks for joining us.
I know, right? That's the cool thing about being virtual.
Yeah.
If there are no other closing comments from the panel, I really enjoyed this conversation. I'm so glad that we got to do this. Thank you so much to the panel, Natrice and Anthony and Julia and Erica, for joining us tonight for this conversation. Thank you to everyone who joined us. And I know that it's a Thursday night and everybody's been on Zoom all day, so we really appreciate you joining us. Dana, if you could put back up the slide with our social media and PayPal info. So we have these events once a month. We hope that you will join us again on the 13th. We try to have them on the 13th of every month. We will be broadcasting this recording on our YouTube, I think maybe on our Facebook as well. So be looking out for that and share it with others who didn't get to join us. And if you would like to donate, we are a nonprofit. We always appreciate any donations. You can donate to us through PayPal. And if there's nothing else, we're going to go ahead and close. Thank you, everyone. Everyone have a good night.
Thank you.
Thank you. Have a good night.
Bye.